Good afternoon, everybody. Today we are here with Wendy Stewart, who is the Vice President of Account Management for Databank. Databank is a co-location and managed services provider. And so we're going to talk to Wendy about some of the things that she's doing here in the industry. So Wendy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yay. Thanks for having me, Carrie. My name is Wendy Stewart, and I am Vice President of Account Management for Databank. I've been with Databank for about 6 years, serving in this role, and excited to talk to you about what I do here at Databank.
So let's start with a little bit about, kind of how you got in the industry, because obviously none of us in the data center industry right now really grew up with the expectation of being there because they didn't exist. So tell us a little bit about your role and kind of how you got there and a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, so been in the space, kind of like this IT type space, for 22 years. Started out at a telco company. It was back in the 90s. It was MFS WorldCom. Started out there just as, and kind of grew up in the industry, transitioned from there over to a few other organizations, worked in the carrier world, did some network design there, and then transitioned over to data center and found out that's where my passion existed, and I've been around for a while in this space.
Cool. So kind of give us a little short non-commercial overview of Databank and kind of where you guys are, what your sweet spot is in the market, what your typical customer is.
Yeah, so a little bit about Databank. We are a data center and managed services provider, and we have data centers throughout the U.S. Our markets include Dallas, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Minneapolis, Cleveland, Baltimore, Salt Lake City, and Indy. And we also have cloud services that kind of complement our data center services as well in those markets. Our sweet spot is small to mid-size type customers. Typically, we do really well with 1 megawatt and below for customers that are looking for colo. And we are on the managed services side. We do platform and infrastructure as a service, so we are kind of hybrid in that space.
And for those that don't really understand what infrastructure as a service or platform as a service, why don't you give us just a quick little short description?
Yeah, so it's either you manage it or we manage it. We have a lot of customers that are very hands-on, and we have some that kind of just want to stand, their infrastructure up in an environment, and then someone else manages that environment for them. So we'll do either one of them for customers. It kind of just depends on the size, your budget, and what your business drivers are.
Sure, and I think a lot of people take advantage of that solution, especially when they are in a space that's not close to where they're physically located as an office. So they just, it becomes very easy just to outsource that, especially for DR sites. But even with the small to medium enterprise, not everybody has the budget for data center personnel, nor do they necessarily want to be in that business. So being able to do the managed services really works. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for outsourcing that, and I definitely think that the data center space and the managed services space complement one another. It's not one or the other. I think that they complement one another well. Sure.
And even if customers have all their own people at one site, in some cases it's just nice to have an intelligent pair of hands at their DR site or their other site, wherever they are. And I think as we see edge compute come around, you're going to see more and more need for some of those services at the edge, because people can't be everywhere, even though sometimes our applications need to be.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things about Databank. We have staff on site 24/7, so we're always staffed and ready for customers that want to work traditional business hours and not run an entire IT operation 24/7. Yeah, so we have a fully staffed NOC and technicians and solutions providers that are on, working 24/7.
Awesome. So I know you're doing some work on diversity and inclusion. We're in a couple of the same groups addressing really women in the data centers, and you started a group there in Dallas. So tell us a little bit about some of the ladies there and what you hope to get out of the group and where this group is going to go.
Yeah, so the group essentially is Dallas Women's Data Center Group, and what we've been trying to do is just create a space for women that are in the IT space, and not just necessarily data center, but in the IT space, that we have an ecosystem where we're sharing leads, we're doing coaching, mentoring, we're sharing skill sets, sharing our success stories, sharing our wins and losses in the space, and hopefully we're building a group of women that will attract additional women to the IT space, which, as you know, is a hugely underserved market for women. And I think I've heard recently that trend is still kind of going down a little bit, where not as many women are attracted to IT.
Yeah, and even the women that get into IT, the attrition rate, last statistic I read, was about 67%, which is pretty horrible.
Yeah.
And a good part of that is women really supporting other women. And I know you and I were on a panel together, and one of the girls from Google said, that there's a difference between being a mentor and a sponsor. And that really sort of stuck with me, in that there is a difference. I mean, I've mentored lots of young ladies, and I know you have too, but certainly being able to be a sponsor and be an active advocate for that person goes a long way. And I think if more people stepped up to that sponsor role, that we could solve certainly some of these problems.
Yeah, and that's I'm very fortunate. I had, someone that really stepped in early in my career that kind of sponsored me throughout my, the progression of my career. And I think that if more women had someone that would be available for not just, helping you get your foot in the door of the company, but, investing in your career for the life cycle of your career. And that's one of the things that I'm passionate about, is just making sure that the women around me have an ecosystem, that the women around me that are in positions that can sponsor and coach people, that they do that. And that's something that I'm really passionate about. And I probably overextend myself trying to be a great advocate for women in this space, but I think it's something that other women really need to see.
Yeah, and we definitely don't have enough of that. I mean, as well as I do that there's a lot of companies that sort of pay lip service to the women in the industry, and even diversity in the industry as far as that goes. But as soon as it gets a little hard, they're like, oh, it's too hard. Let me do something else. So
yeah. And it's one of the things, though, that I've been very fortunate in my organization, where it's a lot of men in the organization, and from my senior leadership down, they're very mindful of that. And, people now, and I'll give you an example. It's another guy that oversees data center operations in my company, and he asked me to review his job posting just to make sure that it was worded right, that women would be attracted to the position, that they wouldn't immediately be turned off and say, oh, that's a guy's job or something like that. So I think awareness and just having candid conversations with your leadership and making sure that, bringing women into the organization in technical role is a priority.
And, that came up on a different podcast too, talking about the difference in job descriptions, and men will apply to a job if they meet 60% of the criteria, and women typically only apply to a job if they meet 100% of that criteria.
Wow.
And so, right. And I think, there's a lot that we can do to change the wording of things. Degrees are a big one, and there's a lot of people in this industry that don't have degrees. And I know that there's a lot of talk about shifting to skills-based hiring and not looking at degrees first, because, in a lot of cases, the on-the-job experience is way more valuable than the degree, because the education hasn't really kept up with the skills needed in the industry. But, simple things like, or equivalent experience, go a long way to attracting talent that may not apply otherwise.
Yeah, and I think organizations really have to do a good job of balancing that. I think some jobs absolutely require degrees in that specific field, but in technology, again, by the time a student starts at a university and wrap up, technology is so far advanced that it's already changed. By the time they get on a job, they're learning on an entirely new skill set. So I think that, if you can be hybrid in an organization and not just put one emphasis over the other, I think that, recruiting for our space, it's more attractive that way.
Well, and I know that you do a good bit of work with junior achievement and some of the minorities. And to be fair, a lot of these kids really need a job to be able to get through school. And they're counting on their employer helping with their education or their certifications or whatever they need. They just need a place to start. And, you happen to live in one of those hubs that sucked up a lot of the data center talent because there's a lot of data centers in the Dallas corridor. It's definitely sort of giving Virginia a run for its money. But, in some of those other markets that you guys are in, where there's not, an advanced curriculum for data center, there's not a ton of active employees. I would think that, trying to find the right people to work in those markets is probably a little more difficult than going and hiring somebody in Dallas where, maybe the way to hire them is just throw a little extra money their way.
Yeah. And that's kind of like the trend. So I think in the smaller markets, I think it's more relational and word of mouth where people leave organizations and they reach back. They know people that were successful in the roles that their existing employers trying to fill, and then just doing a lot of word of mouth networking that way. But again, you can't 100% rely on, just a degree or just, on the job skills as well.
And talking about diversity too, I read a statistic that said like 85% of jobs are filled through a referral, not, through sending in your resume to all these things online and then just, getting kicked out because you don't match enough keywords. But, one thing is humans, we hang out with people that are similar to us. So if we're trying to build real diversity in a workforce, that may mean really looking outside of our circles to find those people that are diverse.
Yep. I absolutely agree. I do think that if you're only recruiting within your circle or attracting talent in that circle, it does limit diversity. And the one thing that I stress is if you want a diverse organization, you have to be intentional when you're recruiting to recruit diverse candidates. And diversity doesn't mean just for, making an effort to bring in more women. It means that you bring in people that are from every type of background, whether that's sex, religion, whatever it is. You have to be intentional when you're trying to diversify your staff.
And I think, too, probably, on top of that is you need to be open to other things like relocation fees. You need to be open to flexible work hours and flexible schedules and understand, that not everybody works the same way. And, we talked about this on other podcasts too. Once you build that diverse workforce, inclusion means that you accept the way that they work and the way that they think and the way that they operate, which is probably not how you do. But if you try to, put their little square peg into your round hole, so to speak, and make them work your way, then you kind of lose the benefit of that diversity and inclusion.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'm even learning here is because we're in so many different markets, the culture in every market is different. So how you recruit talent and attract talent is different. The way that you incent employees or reward employees looks different in every market. It's not cookie cutter. It's not, okay, this is what we do at our corporate office and this is what needs to be done in every other market. What I tell new markets in Databank is when you guys are forming a new market or we're opening a new market, find a way to be a team in that market and create your own brand and identity that ties back to corporate. But again, those markets look different and those cultures are different, and you have to find a way to adjust as an organization to meet those diverse needs within your organization.
So what's probably the biggest shock that you had out of any of those, hiring and recruiting practices in the different cities around the globe?
I would probably say the biggest shock is business hours to different people in different markets look different. And I have some people that are, in one market, it's pretty cookie cutter. It's 8 to 5, and it's consistent. That's what they do. That's how they do. And they perform, but I have other markets with with staff, and their hours are later, and they perform as well, and it just doesn't look the same, but it works. And as an organization, we have to be mindful as if we're building a team and we know what we want the end goal to be, as long as they're meeting that end goal, we shouldn't always, as an organization, have to tell them exactly how to get there. That's diversity, in my opinion, is having the right talent and the right role. And then as long as you identify what the deliverable is and they meet those deliverables, makes the organization function a lot better.
Sure. And, traffic is a big consideration that people don't think about.
Especially in Dallas, yeah.
I was going to say, you live in a pretty good traffic area. So, sometimes 15 minutes in the morning means a difference of 2 hours in a commute when you get in bad traffic. And, I know that you've got a lot of remote employees too, which is something that we can definitely improve on in this industry, is using technology to solve a lot of our problems. Not everybody has to be sitting in the corporate office up under your nose. And some people function very well remotely, although I will say that not everybody does. There are some people that really need that interaction and, that face-to-face time. But, even that's getting easier to do with technology now.
Yeah, and especially with the data analytics around productivity, things like that. There's so many tools. That's one of the things that I'm really focusing on in 2020 is just using some of the analytics on performance so that we are getting a better understanding of how people are using their time and different things like that. So I'm on board with those deliverables for 2020.
Yeah, there was a study, one of the big hyperscalers in Japan went to a 4-day work week and found out that productivity actually increased because people had more time to recharge. And, IT as a whole, it's such a crazy, full-on, hands-on, all the time kind of experience that, I think people really need to have that self-care and that time for, just to recharge and rejuvenate.
And whether you're 24/7 in IT or not, you're 24/7 in IT.
Sure. Almost impossible to have an 8 to 5 job, in this industry. And, if you operate like you do in multiple time zones, it's absolutely impossible anyway. And, people that have done global roles like I have, sometimes you're on the phone at 2:00 in the morning because that's 10:00 in the morning for somebody else. And their work hours are 10 to 6 or, not necessarily 8 to 5. So like I said, I think we have to do a better job of using tech to really help things out in tech.
Yeah. And we're not a global data center provider, but we have global customers. And sometimes that means having, an onboarding call at 3 a.m. And that's exactly what we'll do. So
if you had to, pick what you love most about your job, and I would go back, actually, let's go back a little bit to your telco days and what you loved about that job and how it transitioned into your new job and what you love about your new job and how that experience kind of related in your career progression.
So starting out, I was in college when I started, and I was very young and I was very hungry to learn. And one of the things that I learned early on is there's going to always be people that are going to be smarter than you. And my passion was, okay, you may be smarter, but you're not going to outwork me ever. So kind of just started, working really, really hard in the space. And, when we were building new data centers, I was the girl that was underneath the floor pulling cables. If we had a midnight test and turn up of a circuit, I was the one that was volunteering to, first of all, learn how to test and turn up a circuit, and to be able to do that, just, building my resume. And I think as part of that, I've always been acclimated to wanting to learn and grow in what I do. And I've carried that passion, 20 plus years in the space. And that's kind of helped me in the role that I'm in. As Vice President of Account Management for Databank, some of the things that I'm responsible for is, customer communication, managing, customer contracts, contract renewals, things like that. And I think understanding holistically what we do across all parts of Databank has something that was rooted in me early, learning how to be successful from the ground up and working my way up. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So. Everybody's path is different, right? And things that turn some people on, don't turn other people on. But I will say, probably when I ask that question across all these podcasts, the one thing that people really enjoy about this industry is that there's always something new and it's always changing and it's always an environment where you can learn some things. And so there's never a dull moment. Yeah.
I can attest to that because I don't do the same thing every day. It's something different that, it's not cookie cutter. It's not, you're checking this box and then you're on to the next thing. It's when I always say if there's a different IP address associated with the organization, it's something different that you're going to be doing for them every day.
Sure. And, you have to get used to adapting to customers and the things that they want. And part of a good account manager is not just reacting to what the customer wants, but really, kind of getting to know that customer and getting inside their head so you can be a little more proactive and figuring out what solutions you have that are going to work for them. So, a bit of a puzzle every day.
It is. And just like you say, being proactive versus reactive and understanding what your customers' needs are. Account management is really used as a tool internally as to determine where do we go next. And account management, account mapping, it helps you figure out, okay, what are our customers' needs? What are they looking for? What's their IT roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years? And then we can plan as an organization as to how to not only attract customers, but how to keep customers and grow those customers into what they're already telling us they're needing in the future.
So what would you say, if you were going to take a young girl under your wing today, or, a young person joining this industry, and give them one piece of advice that would carry them over? Or could you limit it to one first?
Oh, God, I probably couldn't limit it to one. But.
Well, what would be a few words of wisdom then for somebody starting out in this industry, as far as direction of career, or whether to get on the account management side or be technical, or, what kind of guidance would you give somebody?
I would I have a few bullet points. So I would say that talent is it's only going to get you so far. You just have to have the desire and the drive. And once you possess those, I think you can kind of define your career path. One of the things that I really had to overcome is when you're in a competitive environment, work ethic looks different for a lot of people. And my motto has been be unapologetic for having a good work ethic. And one of the things that I always tell my team, always tell them, come in every day and just look to be 1% better. I'm not asking for you to show up every day and be 100% better from the previous day, but 1% better. What can I do today that's 1% better than what I did the previous day? And I would say for someone that's young and, bright and coming in and have a lot of new ideas, don't be afraid to share those ideas and to respectfully challenge the process.
And that's really important. Actually, I think one of the best management books I ever read was I'll probably getting the title not exactly correct, but If It Ain't Broke, Break It. Mm-hmm. And it's this customer that actually, or this company that actually rewards employees for breaking processes. They really encourage failure, which I think, honestly, and I'll ask your opinion to this, in some cases, because women, we are a minority in this industry, and certainly women of color are definitely a minority in this industry, but I think we put a lot of onus on ourselves to do a lot, and I don't think we give ourselves permission to fail. Mm-hmm. And companies don't give us permission to fail. And some of the most innovative ideas, I think, come out of failure sometimes.
Yeah, the fear of failure, yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that is a very accurate statement. And one of the things, too, is just how do you balance it all? Like you say, being a female in this space, and we have a lot of competing priorities outside of work. That's different for women than it is men, and I hear a lot work-life balance, and
there's no such thing.
I know, right? And I was reading this book recently. I had my team reading this book, and it talks about work-life integration. Like you're not going to balance it, so find a way to integrate work into your life. So I that's one of the principles that I've been studying a lot, is just how do you integrate work and life together, because the two go together. You can't balance them out.
And that's a good point too. As you take on resources and do things to improve yourself, it's not just about the skills that you learn. There's a lot of soft skills that go with it, and ways that in books that probably have things that are appropriate, time management and all of those things that aren't necessarily a tangible for work, but certainly help with that imbalance.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the best book you've read lately?
The one that I've been getting some really good information out of that I've been reading lately is Emotional Intelligence, and it's the one on mindfulness. But it's a Harvard Business Review book, but it's just been really, really good. Just from a team perspective and just from a leadership perspective, just knowing who you are and how you are within your organization, and to your audience. So it's a good reading. So it's not a long read. So if you get a chance, check it out.
I will. So what would you say is the hardest thing about being a manager of multiple people in multiple locations?
Oh gosh, I would probably say the hardest thing is being constantly aware that each person is an individual. Although we make up a team, they're individuals. And just again, the book Mindfulness, as a leader, it's challenged me to be more present and aware of the individuals that make up a team versus the team that consists of individuals. And
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, and when you have a large team, you have to manage everyone. The deliverable, again, is the same, but you have to find a way to be present with the one-on-one relationship, and that's sometimes that's a challenge because you do want to show up every day and you want everything to look the same, people to think the same, and everyone on my team thinks different, but they typically will come to the same end result, but they'll get to it via a completely different path.
Well, and you can say the same thing for learning anything, really, and I think that's why some of these companies have gone more to skills-based learning than necessarily putting so much emphasis on a degree. Now, if you're a PE and you need to be a PE, obviously you have to have a degree, but there's a ton of jobs in this industry as a whole, trades, veterans coming back that have very parallel skills that aren't
absolutely
necessarily equal. And, women, if you're a mom, you're an amazing organizer. Just saying.
Yes.
But everybody learns differently, and not everybody can sit down and take a test well. A lot of the curriculum, if somebody starts out in this industry and say they have that misnomer that you have to write code to be in the industry, and they go down that path and start writing code and get a degree in that and decide that that's not really what they like doing, there's certainly other things that are very close from a procedure standpoint, right? It's kind of a logical way of thinking, but I think as managers, we really do well. I mean, just like you do when you raise your kids, not all of your kids think the same way. And that's kind of one area that we really stand to improve as we build out more, diverse workforces. So we have to get HR out of this mindset that you have to tick boxes. We have to do a much better job, I think, of educating HR in what we need, especially right now, because it's so competitive in markets like yours. It's crazy. And in large cities too, you might be asking somebody to drive across town, and you better have a great work environment for somebody to put up with that kind of traffic.
Yeah. And that's it's just as hard to keep talent as it is to attract talent to an organization. So again, what you said about, the HR not letting everything just be a checkbox, it's, how do we attract the right talent, the best talent to an organization? It's hard.
Managers, that's one of the things we have to do is keep up with, where the competition is and what the other skills are. And certainly HR can play a role there, but it's, I think there's a big learning curve for HR with this whole skills-based hiring and getting the right people and building diversity.
Especially in technology, yes. We
have to get past using technology to weed out candidates that are probably going to solve the problems we need, right?
Yes, yeah.
We're about at our time limit here, so I would ask you if you had to give some great advice moving forward, places to go, where to reach out, different things in the career, you know, in your career or how you want to grow, what would you say to somebody not in this industry? And what would you say to somebody that is in this industry looking to make a change?
I would say that for someone that's not in this industry, that this is a fast-growing industry. It's something that's always changing and evolving and growing. I would encourage, you know, them to find someone in that space and, you know, find that coach or mentor, someone that's willing to invest in them to help navigate their career in this space. And for people that are in this space that want to continue and grow in this space, I would just, you know, keep training, keep learning and growing, stay coachable, and then just be goals-driven and results-oriented in what you do. And I like to tie everything back to work ethic. You have to be willing to do the work and not just reap the benefits. It's a lot of work in IT, but it's a lot of fun work. We do a lot of fun stuff. And who thought that cars would be, you know, flying or we would be this close to, you know, that, or, you know, all of the AI stuff that we have. This is an amazing space to be in. And I love people that challenge the process and, you know, break it so that we can build it better.
And so where would you recommend people go that are looking for a mentor?
It's a lot of different organizations, like, you know, WIMCO, if you're a woman in, you know, IT space. There are a lot of different organizations locally. I would encourage them to reach out to me. You know, if you're in this market, but I have peers in a lot of other markets that I'm willing to share my ecosystem so that we can connect, you know, like-minded individuals that are looking to grow and excel in this space. And I think that's it.
And LinkedIn's not a bad area either. You know, there's a section on LinkedIn that I don't know if everybody knows about, but you can go and pose questions about your career or things that you want to do. And people that are in this industry, we get tinged with those if we're set up as a potential mentor. And, you know, most of the time, if we have the time, we're happy to answer those questions. I answer them usually when I'm on a plane or headed somewhere.
I get those questions and I answer those questions. I've scheduled calls and talked to people about this space there. So that's a great job that LinkedIn's doing there. And I think it's probably a little bit underutilized. But again, it's not just, you know, lip service. It's people that are really committed to their careers and want to help people navigate around this space. So by all means, use that as a tool as well.
And you mentioned WIMCO. I forgot to ask you earlier, but you are starting a WIMCO chapter in Dallas. And for everybody that doesn't know what that is, that's Women in Mission Critical. It's a part of 7x24 or 7x24 Exchange. And there's a International Data Center Day that's coming up in March that coincides with one of their conferences. But how's the WIMCO going in Dallas?
We're off to a slower start right now, but I know that we just relaunched our Kansas City, so just kind of trying to pick up off the momentum from there. End of the year, start of the year, things are just slowed down a little bit, but something that I'm really excited about for 2020 for Dallas.
Awesome. Yeah, I know you started right around the holidays. That's always a tough one to do.
I know, right?
It's tough to do anything around the holidays.
From Thanksgiving to New Year's.
All right, Wendy. Well, I absolutely appreciate your time. For those of you that want to look Wendy up on LinkedIn, there will be a link to her profile on the description for this podcast. You're certainly, of course, welcome to reach out to me as always. We thank you for your time listening to us, and we look forward to hosting you on another podcast. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Carrie.